Welcome to Sportmentary. Joining me from Winnipeg is the Comish, and we're going to discuss somber days in the NHL. Actually not. We're actually going to be discussing that the lockout is good for the NHL, and Mr. Comish is going to take the affirmative on that. So why don't you get going?
Why is the lockout good for the NHL?
Well, you seem to think so. So why is it?
I do think so, because things are getting out of control. When your very own Minnesota Wild are signing two players for $200 million. My own Winnipeg Jets signed that punk Evander Kane to a 6-year, $31 million deal. It's just, this isn't the NFL. This isn't even the NBA. The NHL is the 5th or 6th tier sport in America. There's no huge TV contract looming, even though they got games that are going to be played on NBC. What's that NBC network now?
NBC Sports Network.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what's that contract worth? All that's going to happen.
I really don't care how much it's worth, to be honest with you, because.
Well, you should care because.
Oh no, the NHL's having record profits. Record profits. Don't cry me the blues about the NHL.
Record profits.
Record profits.
And I don't think the word is profits. The word is revenues.
Well, then it's up to the NHL to figure that out, because this is about revenue share, and if they and it's also about capping a certain percentage. Now, the NHL is in a much better position than they were in the last Gary Bettman lockout. And the NHL wants to take the 50% revenue share and take it down to 43%, then 46%, now 49%. That's off the table. They are disingenuous. Okay? The players know that, and the players are saying, ha ha, good luck to you in your league. We'll go elsewhere, and we'll just sit around and not even worry about it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Good luck to them in their league. They're going to go to the KHL, where only 3 imports or 3 NHL players are allowed per squad. That's not very many jobs. They're going to go play in Switzerland.
The owners know nothing about business. Zero.
What? Do these players want to play in the best league?
Zero about business. Okay? The players.
You're telling me that the owners, these billionaire owners, know zero about business?
Who runs the league? The NHL. Who are the customers to the NHL? The fans. Okay? Who fills out those seats and puts their warm tushes on the seats? The fans. Are the owners saying the customer's always right? No, they're not. One thing they could have done, if they didn't have to lock out the players right now, they could have negotiated and set a deadline at the end of next year. Would things get done? Who knows? Bettman is a lockout freak. He loves it. I'm saying this is bad for the NHL. Why? Because if there's nobody to fill those seats, and in America that could happen, it doesn't matter what the profits are. It doesn't matter what the revenues are. Okay? That's the problem. They're idiots. Okay?
Are you for real? Or do you actually believe what you're saying?
100%, dude.
I think that you've gone off your rocker.
Lockout, by any study, any experts who've looked into it from an American perspective, where the majority of the teams are and the majority of the revenues coming from, will tell you lockout equals bad. Who decided on the lockout? Bettman vis-a-vis the owners.
They didn't have a collective bargaining agreement as of September 15th. There were no rules.
No.
What choice did he have?
They had the rules that would apply if they continued would be the old CBA.
Okay, but you know what your players did? Listen to me for 1 second. Your players went and hired Donald Fair. What's Donald Fair known for doing?
Well, I mean, he only the Major League Baseball Association going through a lockout.
Right, and what did his lockout with baseball create? A world without a salary cap. Where do you think the Winnipeg Jets will be in a world without a salary cap?
The players are not saying no salary cap.
That's their goal here.
No, but if the NHL would have accepted their last offer, right? And I don't know the exacts, but I believe it starts at 55%. That's down 2%. all the way down to 52%, I believe. That's 5 percentage points at the end of the CBA from where they were. Okay? That's not true that they don't want that. The NHL is having record seasons, okay, in this old CBA, and they're not willing to come to the middle. What they want to do is they want to say 43%. That's ridiculous, okay? That's ridiculous. And you know what? At the end of the day, the NHL needs two things. They need the fan, first and foremost, and they need the player. Without it, there's no hockey. Okay? No hockey. And if they could agree to 57% in the past, they should at least compromise now. But Gary Bettman would rather gamble on the league and lock out the players. Shame on him.
My friend, my learned friend, you're so wrong. They each need each other. Without the owners, they don't get to play in the best league in the world. And they don't get these crazy salaries across the board.
Crazy salaries. If you're comparing it to any other league, it's what, a billionth of what these other guys get? I mean, I
disagree. On a basketball team in the NBA, there are only, 12-man rosters? So it's reasonable to assume each player should make an average of $1 million. On a hockey roster, you have a 22 to 25-man roster, not to mention your farm team.
But you're missing a point. If the salary is capped to 57 or 55 or 53%, it might average out to $1 million a player or $500,000 a player, whatever. The players like that were signed to the Wild will take a majority of that, and the rest of the team has to fight for the remainder. Okay? The point being is, it's not everybody making $5 or $6 million a year. It's a couple players on the team, maybe. All right? Therein lies the issue. But it's still the issue is: do you have to lock out the players today? Do you have to screw the fan and treat them like horse manure? Seriously, who cares about either side at this point? It's the fan. And you know what? I hope the fan revolts and shoves it up Gary Bettman's you-know-what.
Well, you know what? Fans are sheeple. They follow each other. They'll go where they want to go based on where their friends are going or what's hot and what's not. And I'm telling you, it's a calculated risk that the owners are taking. I'm not going to deny that in this lockout, because they're going to lose some fans.
A lot.
But they're trying to save the league. They are trying to save the league.
This will kill the league. Now here's an interesting.
No, what's going to kill the league is the fact that no less than 11 teams were for sale at the end of last season.
And you know what? Contract them or move them north. You could play in Portage La Prairie, Manitoba, and draw more fans than some of these teams. Seriously.
Well, finally we agree on something. This is true.
Okay, how many people in Portage La Prairie? 500? You'd still draw more people than the 11,500 the Phoenix Coyotes drew. All right. The problem is you either you either get rid of them or you move them to markets that could hold them, and probably you contract them. Okay, you just say you're gone. What would that do? That would be less players, less revenue shift for those players, right? Because there'd be more people, more hockey players fighting for less spots. Good thing.
I don't think contractions.
Gary Bettman wants to keep on to those Phoenix Coyotes. But here's an interesting point.
Okay, without the Phoenix Coyotes or without being in the South or all over the States, and I don't agree with them being in the South to begin with, but do you think that they would have attracted NBC without being spread out amongst the states the way they are? I don't think so.
Who knows?
I know.
I would say that the majority of games that I've seen on NBC Sports Network last year were in California. But I would say, you got the LA Kings, very successful team. I don't know about the other ones, but I'm guessing San Jose is relative.
The Kings aren't very successful. Come on. They got one Stanley Cup, and
No, but I looked at the attendance figures, and that's what I go on, and I'll say there's very few teams like the Phoenix Coyotes out there. The NHL got rid of one last year called the Atlanta Thrashers, which became the Winnipeg Jets, right? But Phoenix Coyotes, I mean, they're rock bottom, man. I tell you, It's a travesty that Winnipeg has capacity of 15,000, okay, fills it to capacity, and draws 3,500 more per game than, even more. If you go back to February, they were only drawing like 11,000. They picked it up.
No, but the Jets it's an unusual story. They were ripped away from Winnipeg. Hockey hungry market. Let's see them sustain that over the next 10 years.
Well, and you're bringing up a good point, because something interesting that I was reading in the St. Paul Pioneer Press here in the Twin Cities. Yesterday the Wild announced not only going to give a credit to ticket holders for lost games, but they're going to give 10%. All right? It tells you, even though the Wild in ownership had to agree with Gary Bettman and the other owners to be unanimous, the message they're sending is they don't agree. Because if they feel in a hockey crazy market that Minnesota is, all right, which has been featured on just about every network in America on how crazy it is here, if they have to offer 10% interest, they're saying we know we're in jeopardy of losing the fans, even in Minnesota. Why? Because they have the NBA and NFL. And they still draw more than the Wild in a hockey mad market. And what kills Minnesota even more is finally ticket sales were I think they had an increase of 4,000 like in 1 week of ticket sales because of the trade. And that is being jeopardized, and they know it. And that's my final point. Lockout is terrible for the NHL.
Well, this is where I'm right and you're wrong. The NHL realizes the problem. The NHL is trying to do something to get things under control. The only way the NHL can do that is by limiting salaries, because the salaries that are being paid by the fans, for the fans,
I have
to enjoy hockey.
I have one more point. All right? And this comes back to the ownership. You're blaming the players for the high salaries, but it's the owners that went spend crazy, especially with the lockout looming and giving those contracts. And they didn't have to give those contracts. They could have taken a stand, each owner, and said, screw you, we're not going to give it. And each one of them, they can't collude, they can't do it, but individually in their mind say, we're not paying the salary, we're not paying the salary, we're not paying the salary. And the players would go nowhere or would have to sign somewhere for less. It's the ownership who created this mess. And it's the ownership.
They can't do that. But by their nature, these guys are competitive. These are sharks. These are businessmen that made billions of dollars that have stepped over whoever got in their way. They're not going to let another owner outdo them.
They gave the contracts, and now they're moaning and depressed about it. And I have no sympathy for them, because that's bad business. Once again, shows bad business acumen. The lockout shows bad business acumen. And in business, the customer is always right. In the NHL, the customer is wrong. Okay? And I've had enough of the NHL. Because this is ridiculous that we're even having a discussion about a lockout. Because Gary, I gamble on the NHL Bettman, can't do the right thing. Go back to the NBA, Gary. Be an executive with the NBA. Why did you leave? Because Stern probably got rid of your ass.
Well, you missed Gary Bettman's press conference then when he said he doesn't know what he'll do without hockey, how it's his life. Okay? I believe in Gary. I believe he's just speaking for the owners. When Gary speaks, it's your beloved owners that are speaking.
They're not my beloved.
Well, the fact is they can't have one without the other. You need an owner and you need players. They need to find a common ground. It would have been easy to just say, let's split it 50-50, but without the owners, the players have nothing. They have the KHL and some Swedish elite hockey leagues.
Vice versa. You know what I say? Not really true. The NHL goes, some other league will spring up. But you know the problem with the NHL? I read an article, it's actually pretty funny, tongue-in-cheek. Guy saying, if the NHL doesn't smarten up, and they're talking about the ownership and the stupid lockout, and even the players, yes, let's throw in the players there. They risk losing ground to the MLS and whatever that national lacrosse league is in this city, and the WNBA. How would that be? Gary Bettman Maybe you could go to the WNBA. Because this is what's happening to the league. Seriously, if the WNBA and the MLS and this lacrosse league start gaining ground on hockey, and I know it's funny to say it, but that MLS is run really well, all right, and they're now number 5 and creeping up on the NHL. The last thing you want to do is give fans something to go to in markets that have an NHL franchise and go and see soccer for the next 2 months.
Well, you might have a point there, but I think you've just made what my whole point is that the NHL isn't a top-tier sport in the United States, and something has to be done to cap salaries to make sure that things are put in order and in line, and the NHL stops thinking of itself as the NBA or the NFL or Major League Baseball. It's not.
It's a top 4, all right? Now being number 4. But here's the problem. Gary Bettman comes into the league when he came in, what was it, 1992, 93, lockout. Okay? 2 lockouts later, number 3, we're talking about fair. He still leads them 3-2 in lockouts now with this one. It's absolutely ridiculous. All right? The NHL was terribly harmed by the last lockout. And by the grace of God, they were able to rebound. And I tell you that it's a terrible negotiation tactic to strong arm like that. It's going to backfire. I'm not saying the players are 100% right, but to not even in good faith negotiate, all right? Just to say we want to lock out, we're going to lock out, don't worry, accept this or we're locking you out. He doesn't have a clue. And he's going to hurt the league. And it's a travesty. It's a travesty what this man is doing to the league. I said it to you when he came into the league before. Stick to basketball. Basketball is a heck of a lot different than hockey.
Listen, I'm no fan of Gary Bettman, and let's leave it at this. No fan of Gary Bettman, that's for sure. But Gary Bettman just speaks for the owners. And the owners, for once, despite all these crazy signings, I think are trying to do something right, and there's nothing they can do right now when they don't have a willing partner to bargain with.
It's both ways. But one last point, and then we go. Last time around, the players, after a year, they caved in. They know the situation. They're not caving in this time. And Gary Bettman called their bluff, and they're calling it right back. And I tell you, this should not really go beyond a couple months. And even that's a travesty. But with Gary Bettman, I bet he's salivating at the chance of losing a whole season. Because the guy doesn't get it. And
I'm sure he wants to lose a whole season. Come on.
Yeah, I'm telling you, right now, he wants to lose a whole season. And he'll be pretty upset if he doesn't. That's my opinion. Just an opinion.
Well, everybody's entitled to their opinion. Even if it's the wrong one.
All right. Anyway, this has got me worked up. We're talking about hockey when there's no hockey, and that's depressing. Anyway, we'll talk next time on another face-off issue, and put up your poster of Gary Bettman and stare at it all you want.
I'm gonna go do that right now. Thank you.
All right, take care, dude.